Hi, I'm Matt Caffrey. Hopefully you've already seen the first video in this series talking about wargaming. We're now going to talk a little bit about the breadth of wargaming. Next slide. And as always, I always have to start with a disclaimer slide that says these are my views and not those of the folks that are generous enough to give me employment. Next. Okay, so why are we talking about the breadth of wargaming? Well, there's a couple of reasons. When we had our very first Connections conference back in 1993, more on that in the final video, I was expecting some of the military wargamers to enjoy meeting the designers of the commercial war games that they may have played for years. What I didn't expect is what I saw at our very first icebreaker. Air Force wargamers were meeting other Air Force wargamers that they didn't know existed, that they didn't know that particular part of the Air Force did wargaming. Or Army guys would be talking to the Navy and say, gee, you guys do wargaming too? And even in the civilian side of it, you would have designers that had never met each other. And so you had this cross-tell going on even before we got started. And this cross-tell, I think, is very valuable in and of itself. And I think a great illustration of that is from the Age of Discovery, that when the Europeans figured out how to get to other parts of the world, it caused an explosion of knowledge, not only specific facts coming back, but the sheer knowledge that the world was so big and the world was so different and the world was so varied started people thinking in different ways. And it started not only a revolution in geographic knowledge, but it helped lead to an agricultural revolution, a commercial revolution, and really was a big part of the accelerating scientific revolution. So knowing who else is out there is very, very valuable in general. And in some ways, it's even more valuable in wargaming, because if you know who else is doing wargaming in different areas, you can get help from them. I'm not too vain to not ask people from other services, other nations for help. And I've found really good ideas from everywhere. So now let's talk a little bit about everywhere. Next slide. First of all, wargaming is worldwide. As I talked in the first slide, I did some one evening research on my Mac using Google, typing in the name of the nation and the word wargaming, and I got hits on 24 of the 25 largest nations or most powerful militaries, and all unclassified open source, obviously. So we'll talk more about the United States in a minute. And in addition to the nations, NATO does a lot of wargaming as an organization. They have a new wargaming initiative going on. I've been part of a working group that is doing some publishing in the area of wargaming. The Swedes, who are not officially kind of NATO members, have really gone out of their ways to help Partnership for Peace wargaming. So, and then as far as nations go, Russia is spending money on wargaming, but they're not talking very much about it. I know a lot about how the Soviets wargamed and almost nothing about the Russians. The Chinese are a fascinating case. I could give a 20, 30-minute talk just on the history and evolution of how China does wargaming. But they're spending a lot of money on it, and they're creating a lot of additional capability. You also have a lot of wargaming in India. India is a very strong, very important, very innovative country. And they do wargaming with us and the Russians. They do live constructive wargaming, a lot of different aspects, and the more popular wargaming too. The United Kingdom does live wargaming, virtual, constructive. They do it as part of their defense establishment. They do it in their service schools. King's College has one of the world's leading wargaming programs, both for their students, but also a hub of wargaming that's very well respected around the globe. France has live, virtual, and constructive wargaming, both within their government and also commercially. Germany opened up a new wargaming center at their war college. It was the largest and most expensive military construction project out of the former outside of the former East Germany since the reunification of Germany. So that gives some indication of their emphasis on wargaming. And you can go down the list further and find more and more cases of countries doing not just some wargaming, but quite a substantial amount of wargaming, and wargaming in a whole range of different areas. Then, as far as popular wargaming goes in the U.S., miniatures started in the U.K. They sometimes call it figure wargaming, but we're probably the second most prolific provider of miniatures rules and stuff like that. And again, if you don't know what that is, think of a model train table, but instead of model trains, you have actual little statues of soldiers and physical tanks, and you can recreate the Battle of Gettysburg, the Battle of Agincourt, or Starship Troopers. Then the paper board war games. We lead the world in that area. We publish more paper war games than anybody else, but we do not have a monopoly. France, Spain, England, a lot of countries, Japan also publish print war games. Computer war games are we started the air with computer war games. We started computer games. Now, quite a few countries have a great deal of computer wargaming, and computer gaming in general is a huge industry. It's larger than Hollywood as far as total income, and it passed by Hollywood back in the early 2000s, 2004, 2006, depending on how you do the math. Then on the academic side, we have a number of universities that have courses in wargaming. Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. not only has a very good course, but they have a speakers program that just really dynamite talks. The U.S. government has wargaming taught at our Naval Postgraduate School. I help teach a course for Air Force Materiel Command that's transitioning over to our Air Force Institute of Technology, the U.S. Naval Academy, Marine Corps University, Command and Staff College, the Army Command and Staff College, the Naval War College, all has instruction in wargaming. And then the Military Operations Research Society also has a military wargaming certificate program, help people get a basic grounding in kind of the operations research analytical end of the wargaming spectrum. And then as far as the U.S. government goes, wargaming goes beyond the Department of Defense. Wargaming is done by the National Security Council. Wargaming is done inside the intelligence community for a number of different applications. And of course, the Defense Department. Next slide. So within the Office of Secretary of Defense, several different organizations do wargaming, organizations that report directly to the Secretary. You have the Office of Net Assessment. Now, Net Assessment is looking at the balance of military strength, not just technology, but numbers, training, doctrine, doing a net assessment of all soft power, hard power, of all the different factors. They not only do a lot of wargaming, they contribute to the advancing the art of wargaming. The Office of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, they're the great-grandchildren of McNamara's bang buck kind of calculations, and they have been doing varying levels of wargaming for decades. The policy folks do wargaming, except I haven't heard very many details. Then on the joint staff, you have J8 that does studies, analysis, and gaming division, the guys from SAGD. And oh, by the way, SAGD was established by President Eisenhower. So it's been around for many, many decades and has done some very influential wargaming. And then the J7 does more force-on-force wargaming. And then as far as the combatant commands, the various different geographic and functional commands we have around the world, they all have their own wargaming shops. They all have their own wargaming centers. So the European Command started it with the Warrior Preparation Center, but the U.S. Pacific Command has the Warfighting Center of the Pacific. Special Operations Command has their Wargaming Center. So a lot of wargaming being done at that level. Next. And the services all have their own wargaming functions. So there's a whole class of war games. Each service has a responsibility to organize, train, and equip within their area. It's from Title 10 of the U.S. Code. So when they do a war game, that helps them look at where should they organize, train, and equip. Those are referred to as Title 10 war games. So the new U.S. Space Force has the Schriever war game that they've been doing since around 2000. The Army Center for Strategic Leadership is the home for Army's Title 10 wargaming. The Navy's wargaming department at the Naval War College does their big Title 10 wargame called Navy Global. The Marine Corps wargaming department down at Quantico does Expeditionary Warrior. And all these wargames have very significant impacts on budget decision, force structure decisions. They really are very important to each of their services. And then the federally funded research and development centers, FFRDCs, quite a few of the FFRDCs are very active in wargaming. Project RAND did a lot of the work in the 1950s that really helped us leap ahead of the Soviets in our wargaming techniques. The Center for Naval Analysis has been doing wargaming work mostly for the Navy, but also for the Air Force and a number of other people for a lot of years. And again, there's several other FFRDCs. There's just not enough room. Same thing with defense contractors. The two most prominent are probably Booz Allen Hamilton and SAIC, but there's many, many other defense contractors that also are very active in wargaming. Next. Okay, and then as far as the Air Force goes, we also have Title 10 wargaming. The headquarters Air Force and Air Force Futures are very involved in wargaming. Our Title 10 wargaming, we have two. We have Global Engagement, and then the Air Force Future Capabilities game, which takes too long to say. So people usually just call it Futures Game or FG. And then we have a war game called Plan Blue, and this is a rather interesting war game. The team leads are 2-stars, and the players are brigadier generals. So talk about a high-level war game. The Air Force also has a wargaming center that's specifically for Air Force use. It's down at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, the LeMay Center Wargaming Institute. Our MAGCOMs also are very active in wargaming. Of course, Air Combat Command is the home of the different flag operations. Everybody knows about Red Flag. It's been called the ultimate war game. But we also have Virtual Flag, where guys are flying simulators. We have Blue Flags, that's mainly command and control. Green Flag, we have Air Education and Training Command that has a lot of wargaming that contributes to military professional education. We've got our Global Strike Command. Their big war game is Strategic Vigilance. Then our Air Force Special Operations Command participates in the U.S. Special Operations Command war game, Shadow Warrior. Then you have Air Mobility Command with Global ACS, which is a workshop that contributes to the Air Force Title 10 war games. Then you have Air Force Material Command that is the co-host for Global ACS. It also does something called the Long Duration Logistics War Game that actually looks 6-7 months into campaigns to see what we're running out of or running low of in different theaters under different scenarios. And then a war game specifically focused on identifying the likely military impacts of different areas of science and technology that we could work on, that we could try to develop. So a lot of wargaming done by a lot of people. So back to where we started. Europe's voyages of discovery sparked a revolution that is not just geographic, but scientific, commercial, agricultural. Learning more about wargaming around the world can help us learn how to wargame better ourselves. And frankly, I think also provide a bit of a motivator. Because remember, wargames save lives, but they save lives for the side that wargames more effectively. And there's no commandment brought down from a mountain, chiseled into stone, that says the United States or and our friends and allies must be the side that war games more effectively. Whether or not we war game more effectively will be up to just how effective each of us are going forward. And one big part of helping us to be more effective is the Connections Conference. And the final video in this series will be how the Connections Conference got started, how it's evolved, and maybe how it can be even more effective going into the future. So thank you, and hope to see you, hope you participate in the final tape, and hope to see you at Connections.